Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 657 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Alexey Arestovich, and Nikolay Feldman, the journalist of Alpha&Omega. Today, thanks go to Bill for super thanks. We much appreciate your help. And also, among our members, we want to honor Daniel Smith today. Thank you for sticking with us for about 14 months already. One more note, if you're looking for a unique gift, Fuselage Creations has a very unusual line of keychains made out of the skin of downed Russian jets over Ukraine. So you may want to check it out. The link will be under the video. And with this, let's deep dive into day 657. The main title of this one is Ukraine is in the funnel of catastrophes and the West is bankrupt. Take a listen. Good evening, everybody. My name is Nikolay Feldman. You're watching War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Alexei joined our stream. Yes, good evening. A lot of news happened over the last 7 days. All largest global media wrote about Ukraine, probably not in the light we wanted to, but let's try to disassemble it piece by piece in the next hour. Let's perhaps start with the news about the hacker attack that occurred today on Ukraine. Kyivstar and other mobile operators got hit. Kyivstar probably was hit the most. Most observers connected that with related offensive on the front, near Kupiansk region. So perhaps let's start with the front. Do you think they're connected? We can rely on the statement of two commanders, Ternovsky on the south and Syrsky on the east. They both are saying that the enemy is attacking along the whole front line. In the war times, any such events, especially when it's a global attack on the whole Ukraine, you do want to look and observe in connection with other events happening. And of course, cyber doctrine is acknowledged by China, United States, and Russia as the space for conducting warfare. So if anything happens, it should be treated as possible warfare. And by the way, disrupting communication also has direct effect not only on panic with the civil society, but also on communications between military detachments on the front line to a degree. So we can probably connect one with another, and that cyber attack can definitely be connected with the overall offensive increase by Russian Federation. And what do we know, okay, Alexei, about the attacks on the front line? Does it make sense to bring them up? It doesn't matter quite, Nikolai, we can tell the whole story. They really are started their offensive, given that they first accumulated some reserves, and second, that we have issues with our reserves and with material supplies that we should have stockpiled, but we actually don't. And it's also the phase of war, so it is difficult to counterattack the attacking party. That's why when we were counterattacking, they were waiting for us to wear out. And this is how the war is being conducted. It's going in phases. One wave goes, then the other wave comes. And now they're active. We can see a lot of confirmations, not only from their side, but also from our side, about some motions on the front near Bakhmut, a bit to the south of Bakhmut. They are now again at the railroad. Remember, we pushed them beyond the railroad. Now we're fighting again over that. Now, there was a picture of them holding a flag near some locale in Mariinka, so they're trying to push there. In Avdiivka, apparently they are moving in a bit, and on the south, right in the south of Avdiivka, they entered the outskirts of town, and there are serious actions near Kupiansk as well, and they're basically pressing along the whole line today. In the south, there's also some pressure near Tokmak. purge, and our troops are conducting active defense. Yes, you can see here we are going to some counteroffensive actions in different places, but you can see even on this map they're drawing maps from the red side to Rabotina and also near Novofedorovka. So they're trying to push. And unless we find some very serious resources, because if to put it delicately, there are problems on the material level, not only with artillery shells, but also with nomenclature of other munitions. And this is the price we pay for slow walking, slow down in the Western support in this war. Perhaps now it's time to switch to what's happening in the United States, right? No, let's first announce the fundraiser. Guys, we have a big fundraiser, 3 million hryvnias for battalion named in honor of Kuchitsky. And this fundraiser, they actually gave it a name in honor of Felix Kurtanich. This is a dead hero who was a young man who dreamt since his school years of being a soldier, being an officer. And when the war started, he joined the forces as volunteer. And when the big war ensued, he was one of the intel operators, and he died in conducting one of the intel raids. His area of specialty was also UAVs, and he was a big proponent of unmanned aerial craft, and his friends are developing this direction in this battalion, and they're doing the fundraiser. They asked us to help them purchase 3 UAVs that would allow them to increase their fire control capabilities for the battalion. The fundraiser is rather big, for 3 million hryvnias, but we have closed even bigger ones, so let's start the process. Thank you very much. And now let's go to the United States. President Zelensky is in the United States today. The key topic of his visit is around the fundraising for Ukraine and support for Ukraine, and there have been a lot of events happening around it. And besides him meeting President Biden, there was news that the Congress of the United States is not going to review a plea for aid from Ukraine, despite the visit of Zelensky to the country before they go on Christmas holidays. It is not in the agenda, and starting the 15th of December, Congress members go on Christmas holidays till the 8th of January, and Congress stays out until the 9th of January. So basically, Zelensky's visit did not affect donating new money to Ukraine, or fundraising or donating new money for Ukraine from the United States. Biden mentioned that there'll be 2 additional transfers this year. Well, I can also say here that probably he did not affect the agenda and the calendar of the voting, but he did affect people in the moral side of things due to his visit. There's still some ghostly hope, like 1 minute before the match is over, that maybe there'll be a vote. But realistically, most likely they won't, right? And one of the reasons that would indicate that is that this law has not passed the Affirmation Commission, so it needs to go through some logistics before it being brought to vote. And most likely, they'll go through all the process and will likely be brought to agenda at the second half of January, and they will be voting most likely for that in February, actually. So Biden says that he's giving 200 million right now, but one needs to understand that this is a vanishingly small number in relation to our real needs. And it's not the main thing. You cannot load money in the guns and shoot. We need material aid, we need ammo, we need artillery shells, and there are problems with that. And these problems have a principal character, 2 very important moments that people understand. First is political situation in the United States. All that war in Ukraine, in Israel, the heating up near Taiwan, it got the United States probably at the lowest stage, at the lowest level of their political readiness to respond to these challenges, probably in the last 40 years since Reagan, since the collapse of Soviet Union, because the United States is essentially in the situation of a steaming civil war, religious civil war, And we keep seeing people in Congress who discussing these matters who come and say there is no advancement in negotiating over the subject. The thing is that on the Republican side, isolationists are prevailing. There are different Republicans there, but isolationists have a very simple doctrine, and I'll be using direct statements. I'm not going to cherry pick the words here. They care about United States, and they want United States to be concerned with United States. They are up against the globalists and righteously indicating that a lot of projects that globalists are pushing, they have failed. And globalists in the current administration of United States are also incapable to solve the current problems that United States face. And they bring up the immigration law, the border with Mexico, and infrastructure repairs, and that the fact that we're spending so much money in the United States for Ukraine instead of fixing our own country. So isolationists want to drop the problem of Ukraine war onto Europe. And they also communicate rather close with Orban and other forces in Belgium, Germany, Italy, France, etc. on the right side. For them, to drop the topic, that problem onto European shoulders is to stop aiding Ukraine. So they literally talk about stopping any kind of aid to Ukraine. They're discussing seizing the money transfers and the weapons transfers. And part of that idea is also to shame Democrats that their investments in Ukraine were just as useless as in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is the logic of isolationists. These are the party that is supporting the national agenda of the United States, not international. And today they're dominating on the right. They are in communication with Orban, who is in 24 becoming takes the presidency of the European Union. So he has more ways to push his agenda. And in 24, EU will be voting for adopting Ukraine in there, right? And also the right in the Europe suggesting to diminish the monetary support. Germany recently, as you remember, suggested to diminish the support by 20 billion. Then Austria today made a statement that Ukraine probably is not ready to be in the EU. And essentially, this is the coalition of the right that is achieving their own goals, that have their own program, that they realize, what else can we do here? We can hope for some agreement between Democrats and Republicans, but this would mean the diminishing support from the United States, or some extraordinary mechanism that President Biden can turn on, going around the Congress, perhaps Lend-Lease, if they revote that again. And he has some extraordinary measures when he can take some weapons from the warehouses of American army and deliver that to Ukraine. But even if that happens, and I'm very not sure if it will, that still would mean the diminishing amount of aid. And New York Times came out today with an article saying that Ukraine needs to switch to strategic defense, save ammo, save artillery shells, save people. And when did I mention that on our stream? Oh yeah, I can say you did that earlier. Right, exactly. So now the whole media picked the whole thing that we talked about since the beginning of September. Just don't mix it up, that we are Russian spies when we talk about that, but Americans are wise Western politicians when they say exactly the same thing. Yeah, the head of Ukraine Security Committee, Danilov, was actually attacking you for these statements, and today he's coming out with the same statements over in Ukraine. Right, fantastic. How far did Russian spies get? All the level up to the head of the National Security Council. That's a satire and sarcasm. So the West, summing it up, is not ready to adequately respond to the war that is being put in front of it by the Global South. Now let's talk about the military supplies. I went to annual reports by the main American manufacturers, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed, and the rest. I actually translated some of that information in my post so people can read in Russian. The growth of American military industry, the plans for that growth up until 2031 is at 0.60% a year. This is essentially a sentencing and signed by United States saying we are getting ready to lose the global war. Of course, there is a plan B, and I read and listen and talk a lot, And there are a lot of people holding that shaman artifact and repeating the mantra that the West will wake up, the West will wake up, the West will wake up. It cannot not wake up. It will realize it soon. They understand that there is no alternative. The alternative to West not waking up is death, especially for Ukraine. But in regards to the West waking up, I want to say this. The whole model of the West, especially in the industrial military complex, is not thinking about, it doesn't have the capacity to rapidly increase manufacturing. It's physically not there yet. The factory in Phoenix, in Arizona, 40 billion of investments, they cannot have enough production force to continue to get it started. They're actually producing some, but not at the rate that they need to. They even thought of bringing Taiwanese there or maybe train Mexican, but unfortunately, they're not there. The factory is not producing at capacity it should be. So what they're reporting giddily in the West about investing billions of dollars into military industry, but in reality, this is essentially a marketing trick. All these statements, the task of that is to increase the capitalization of the company. Their main task is to make sure the shares price grows and material production doesn't. You'll be hard to find any material growth. And if it exists, it's a compromise. It's a very weak compromise between trade unions and the cost of labor and the cost of shares. And it's very often not in favor of production, because when the West is being dominated by capital, by shareholders, it's not dominated by the volume of production. And what it leads to is that employees, the workers, try to get more compensation for their work. The cost of each shell grows, and that's why in Russia, each shell is like $200, a Western shell is $2,000, and it keeps growing. And the real production is not growing at any notable rate, and definitely is not meeting the demand by Ukraine or Israel. And Taiwan is not even burning yet. But you can already see the transfer of 50,000 shells being transferred from Ukraine to Israel and then back. It shows that the West is absolutely not ready to wage this war and will not be ready in the next few years, if they ever will be. Because in order to just win in one of these conflicts, the West has to take resources from all the others. So you have to forget about Taiwan or Israel for Ukraine, or forget about Ukraine and Israel for Taiwan, or forget about Ukraine and Taiwan to aid Israel. This is the price for the false pride and the belief that they're the shining city on the hill, starting in 91 probably, when they don't want to see the deception and they don't want to see reality. Georgia, Crimea, and then all the stupidities that they did in Iran and Afghanistan. They can change situation, but they would need to switch to the extraordinary management mode, and there has to be a strong figure in the leadership who would say, we are transferring our economy to the military mode, and we're ready to resist the global south, not even directly engaging them, but through a system of proxy wars by supporting our allies. And we concentrate on production, and they still would need time and tens of billions of dollars invested, and the change of the whole financial model around these companies. And how do you think United States will react to the change of that financial model, to an appeal to go to machinery and to start production? I think it'll be a catastrophic. Exactly. The moment the welfare model breaks, they actually will be facing civil unrest in major cities of the United States. It'll be similar to BLM, only worse, because a lot of people will be rebelling if they're not getting social support from the government. Then it'll have a domino effect on the share market, on the stock market, and it'll be affecting the whole financial system. That's why I'm saying when the West was caught with its pants down, it was caught 3 times pants down. So first, they're not ready materially. They need time and effort to change their production. Second, they don't have a subject who would afford to do that. And third, if they do find such a subject who is capable of making these decisions, they will need to first wage internal civil war to win for that subject to take command. And this is a significant issue. I'm saying the West is completely bankrupt at this moment. It is just a huge machine that it will take time to fall. But I'm already seeing the signs, and stopping the aid to Ukraine is essentially a symbol of that trend. And it's a whole other topic that we can talk about, but symbolic one was the motion of those 50,000 shell when they took it from Israel, gave it back to American resources, American troops, and then transferred to Ukraine, and then withdrew from Ukraine back to Israel. You know, President Zelensky could be 300 more times charismatic and great leader. Nothing would have helped. We need a different politics now, but I'm afraid we'll need 3 more months to just understand that we need new strategy, new politics, and then 3 more months, and then 3 more. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. All right, let's go over the other news you mentioned. There are a lot of details that generally confirm what you're saying. New York Times is making a statement that President of the United States is facing a difficult dilemma that hasn't been solved for a couple of decades already and doesn't have bipartisan support. And basically, he has to figure out what to sacrifice in order to get what he wants. So let's try to unwrap that, why the question of immigration does not find bipartisan support. Why going for that border issue will crumble his party support. Well, it's rather simple. Democrats managed in the last couple of decades to grab several states and convert them into Democrat. First of all, Republicans used to have some red states, and most of them are in the red belt down south, where religion is rather strong. And Democrats managed to make a dent in the Republican states by bringing more immigrants and allowing them different ways to vote, and also by giving Obamacare to those who cannot afford medical insurance. And Republicans are thinking that they now have a golden moment of their agenda. Unfortunately, very few of them understand what will be the future price to pay and what is the price in the global agenda they have to pay if they pursue that agenda. But they don't give a damn because they were not the ones who started that. They basically pointing finger at the globalists, Democrats, and the Obama trace. And the point is that if they push through that law of immigration and the wall on the south becomes the material expression of that law, Democrats will lose a lot of support on the left of their voters who would think that they've been betrayed. And Republicans are basically trying to use the chance to break the global trend that started with around Obama. And it's a way for them to win in the conflict that they often also treat as a religious conflict, because many of them are believers. And the vocabulary they use when they talk about Democrats is the language of crusades, essentially. Satan, God, and they have serious issues that they pose to the left. They're basically telling, watch the movie, What is a Woman?, where Matt Walsh is walking around American universities and asking questions in universities, at schools, and clinics where they change gender. And everybody is afraid to give a clear answer. Most his respondents are afraid. So all that propaganda of LGBT, all the transgenderism, and that pushed on the kids. So for them, this is a holy war. This is a matter of survival. They think that they can drop extra problems like Ukraine, Taiwan, and the rest, and save at least the city on the hill. They've always believed that. So let the world burn. Let's make sure that United States is all right. And we can, if we save that, and the God comes here in his second coming, he might find a lot of righteous people in this country. And this is their viewpoint. This is people who determine the Republican politics, and a lot of their electorate is of the same belief. And I apologize with Israelis, but if you think of in terms of crusades, they've almost taken Jerusalem. They're at the final battle. And Democrats are resisting because for them it's the loss of trend that was prevailing for the last 20 years, which they were believing with the same religious fervor. The freedom, LGBTQ, etc. These are essentially two religious points of view colliding by the level of pressure, by the viewpoint and all. So this war just hasn't spilled to the streets, but you can definitely feel it around in rhetoric, in politics, everywhere. And we're hostages of this war. Yeah, we're a projection of this war. So we are in three traps, and it's very difficult for us to get out of it. The only way out is a rapid increase of adequacy from our side. And if somebody believes that the West may awaken, I want to warn you that you may not like the West that wakes up. Everybody thinks that awoken West is Reagan or Thatcher, who are coming to the pulpit and saying that yes, we're back, we'll be defending the humanity and the freedom values. There's a big probability that new awoken West could be in the face of Musk-like people who would bring the calculator and say, Zelensky is a butcher, here's the calculator, why do we need to help Ukraine? And when you say, no, it is not so, then they pose you questions. Okay, why did you sign Istanbul Declaration? Why are you instilling the LGBTQ agenda in your schools? And our Minister of Education failed to answer the question from the West if we signed the declaration or not. So seems like we did. And yeah. So you said that Republicans don't understand what it will turn into for them. Can you unwrap that? Oh, no, they understand that for them it will turn out to be a victory. It'll be difficult for the whole world, not them. But they may come to a situation when they need to fight not for Poland, but for Washington. Not that Russians and Chinese will land there, but that they might have to fight for Washington in a civil conflict, because the amount of contradictions that is now in American society is increasingly large. Both projects are somewhat at dead ends. And of course, globalist projection suggestions is rather bankrupt now. And the right suggesting an isolation as a solution, but it is also false. It's like trying to get born back again, unborn when you're born. So they are facing essentially a situation when they have to stay a global player, but they need to redefine their global strategy. And there are no right solutions there. Musk is calling himself a third pathway representative, but his pathway is essentially isolationism and going to space. But maybe, but again, it doesn't help us overall. And here, I think he believes more in Russia as another spacefaring power than Ukraine. So, and in order for the United States to even consider the third pathway, they need to formally or informally fail on the other two projects. Globalist project has already collapsed. Now, if the conservative side wins, their project also needs to face a certain collapse in order for them to start looking for the third way. But what will happen with us in the meantime, that's a big question. So, about the religious and ideological contradictions, there is another news that talks about Democrats in the United States could not convince Republicans in the necessity to aid Ukraine. Secret briefing turned into a screaming match. They basically started yelling at each other. Republicans accused Democrats in attempting to circumvent their demands for security at the border. And do we know what Democrats suggested on the border? They propose a ton of different options to avoid doing what Republicans are asking. That doesn't even warrant our discussion. They will not come to an agreement. And they might find some temporary solution in the next 2 months, but yeah, we're coming back to the thing. They're screaming at each other, right? They're not negotiating. American political culture made another big mistake. It's a fundamental mistake. They indeed had independent court, and this was one of the main know-hows of the West that allowed to resolve the conflicts of elites, internal conflicts, more or less judiciously. And when the left decided to not let Trump to run for presidency through a court system, they violated one of the American rules that basically says the president can be assassinated, but you cannot use judicial branch for your political vendetta. And I don't think they fully understand what they've done. They've broken the last pillar, and that's when Republicans started resisting. On the 16th of December, Congress is voting for the impeachment to Biden, and they have rather good chances to get it passed. And this is the next stage of the funnel of political crisis in the United States. And for sure, after such action, it'll only be more difficult to agree about the wall for immigrants on the southern border. That's what the Democrats done. They've broken the last pillar. They've unleashed that demon. They should have kept the judicial system, the court system, outside of their conflicts. The last barrier before the stream breaks everything and washes everything away, they broke that barrier. An important quote that deserves to be brought up from New York Times: "We're going to leave Ukraine," said the Democrat senator from Connecticut, Christopher Murphy. "When Putin attacks NATO countries, they, Republicans, will regret the day when they decided to play politics with the future security of Ukraine." That quote, do you think, is that fully representative of what will happen after? I think everything will be happening much worse than they're quoting now. Ukraine is really in the funnel of catastrophes. The only way out is to switching to the mode of extraordinary convent, when bureaucracy is being replaced by a special political body, avoiding all the bureaucracies, just like in a battle, when most serious personal responsibility falls on those who do not fulfill the orders of the convent. But we are in a country where political system is rather weak, where it seems we have our own political crisis in the parliament, and it becomes more visible, and there is a crisis of power growing. And our society is anarchical overall, where each is a ruler to himself, right? So in order to realize that convent statement, one would need to put maybe 20,000 people in jail who will be actively resisting that, and I'm not sure we're ready for that. Well, look, we are in a parliamentary crisis. David Arahami is making a statement that we have a lot of congressmen who are willing to leave. They're writing resignation writs. They don't want to be in this Congress, and they're not let go. So just think of it. Congressmen are trying to run away from responsibility, and the Congress is doing its best to hold them. This is crisis, right? Looking like a catastrophe. Tishenko also mentioned today that the head of the leading party, Alena Shulyak, will be removed soon. And this is also an element of the crisis. When the congressman from the leading party is saying our leader failed everything and she will be removed. Well, yeah, but he was expelled from this party, right? So we can say ex-congressman from that party, but he's not without an entrance and his ways into the presidential office. He's got connections. I think the whole crisis started to raise its head when they started to throw responsibility on Zaluzhny and Johnson, when Arahami came out with it. Now, let's look at our president in the United States. He's continuing the same strategy of emotional conviction, appealing to American congressmen and people that Ukraine needs their help. And I don't know who's consulting him. Maybe they indeed are consulting him and they give him all the best keys, but this one was still the only option that they thought is feasible. This is also a solution, but I don't think we will like the results of that strategy. And for me, this is also a sign that he failed to change his rhetoric. That means he is still using the outdated strategy, which doesn't quite work. The only strategy that would work if we would suggest the West a real system to rebalance the interests in Eastern Europe, Russia, ex-USSR countries, and the United States and collective West. If we would have found such a solution, then we probably would have had a chance. But we're not finding it. We're continuing the same rhetoric from a year ago, and it leads us deeper into the funnel of catastrophes. And another element that I saw today, when the president said that we pushed a little closer near Gorlovka, pushed the front line to the right, and liberated some territory, a Terikon near Gorlovka, and captured several Russian prisoners of war. So, as one of our viewers commented on that today, Arestovich and Feldman stopped commenting on the situation on the front, so president is now commenting on that. This is a sign of a very difficult crisis. When a president needs to talk about such a small progress on the front, it means that everything is so bad that taking prisoner several Russian fighters is now a presidential level agenda. To shed at least one ray of hope on everything happening. This is a very, very bad sign, and he knows that. Right, but there is another moment here that by this action, president outlining a very insignificant event on the background of a Russian offensive activation, he basically reconfirmed the plan that Simon Schuster described in his article about Gorlovka. It actually existed. It's a real plan that indeed there were orders overhead over the head of Zaluzhny to take Gorlovka, and now that plan is being realized in some capacity, and Ukrainian president is making an emphasis on it, being in Washington, right? Being in Washington at the biblical split in the American politics, our country is already facing a catastrophe. According to the theory, catastrophes, we're already at the third stage. From the fourth, it's only God's grace that can save you. If you're on fifth or sixth, you're already doomed. And everybody is expecting more commentary from Zelensky on a grander scale. He could have turned to his soldiers and told them, guys, hold the line, I'm here getting us additional aid. Instead, he is talking about these events. And our media here are peddling that they hacked Russian tax system, while Russia is not confirming that. And it's similar to Klitschko when the the subway was flooded. He started putting more emphasis on shooting the movie about shores and Ukrainian unity. So here, a president too, instead of guiding us in a grander scheme, he is focusing on minuscule achievements, and it basically is a sign. And the world is ruled by signs. Very often, you can tell the future. And when Russians are taking and pushing us back, our president is concentrating on Terikon near Gorlovka. And I don't see any signs that we're going to change strategy. I don't know how they gauge their actions, but it looks like their actions are not matching the circumstance. So that means that they probably have errors in estimating the situation, and they're not telling the truth as it is to us and to people at large, but they're generally just holding the falling pants of hope and trying to inject something in the news about Ukraine hacking Russian tax system or something. And we've shot this TV series about shores, and we also took a small perch near Gorlovka. Right? It's similar to a sinking Titanic, when a captain would come out and said, look, the cannery just sung a song. Or look, the metal handlebars are so shiny. And the wheel actually moves so smooth, despite that it's not really connected to the rudder anymore, and we cannot manage our ship, we cannot direct it, steer it, but hey, look, it looks smooth. And oh, we found new truffles for the canteen. We can get that, and that's all while it's sinking. And everything will be good. There is a journalist of Bild, Yulian Rybke, who posted 2 theses in the past week that shook the world a bit, and our moods in Ukraine as well. And I'm reading a quote here. United States of America has over 6,000 main battle tanks, Abrams, out of which 2,600 at least are battle-ready. Despite that, they gave to Ukraine only 31 tanks. During the last 10 months, they have not promised to give any additional tank. How could Ukraine win the war against Russia with such a minuscule number? And also in the commentary to this article, he mentioned that United States have 1,000 ATACMS in service, and Ukraine only got 20. And that tells a lot, says the analyst, if United States are supporting Ukraine in such a dripper fashion. Actions speak louder than words. I think he is generally correct, right? What prevents Biden's administration from just transferring these munitions directly to Ukraine without agreeing with the Congress? Because they have the right to do that, right? They don't have an answer to why, I think. I think they have an answer, but that also was indicated in the Western press, that one of their main principles is not to allow this conflict to spill beyond the borders of Ukraine, do not give weapons that can be used to attack the territory of Russia, and do not turn that into a nuclear conflict. And all that bumped into the politics of Vladimir Putin, who made other decisions a year and a half ago that everybody were laughing about. Well, how it is now? You still laughing? And he also managed to change the agenda, Russia versus Ukraine, to a global North and global West versus the global South. And global West seems to be very incapable right now to do anything, because it is warring within itself. The West is being attacked essentially when they're conducting an active political, religious, and philosophical war within itself. And this is the classic of Little Spectre School. What they get taught in this, little specters get taught in the first grade. If you want to attack somebody, make sure the attack goes from outside and from within. That's just a classic approach. I will say one more thing that not many people talk about, that Republicans and Democrats, globalists and isolationists fighting with each other, are now trying to find allies without really picking. As one friend of mine says, I lived such a rich spiritual life that I wasn't really using any means of preservation and taking all kind of courses. So Americans and American politicians are now conducting political life without any protection. And they're picking any allies they can find, and they fall into special relations with China, with Russia, with Saudi Arabia, with India, and those countries are playing them as a flute. And the worst part is that Americans cannot stop doing it. They keep doing it. So who intervenes in American elections? Everybody who's not lazy. And that's why the overall strategy of the Global South, and Putin recently visited Saudi Arabia and Emirates and talked for 5 hours with Iran president, and Lukashenko visited that country as well. These are all the signs that they are getting their strategy together to prepare for the victory of isolationists in the United States. And that's it. America will stop projecting force outwards, and these countries now can figure things out to their liking. Who can afford that to do? Well, big forces, right? China, Russia, maybe Saudi Arabia. So they're going, and of course Iran. And if United States will withdraw and create a vacuum on the global scale, that will definitely allow them to. And if states are barely conducting some politics and some actions against the current 3 hotspots in the world, they can throw more. They can do Guyana, they can do something in Africa, and states will just drown. So that journalist also posted one more thing. He said that Biden's administration was deceiving Ukraine and the world and itself for 6 months until they realized the reality. Is it, you think, a true statement that Biden's administration actually recognized the reality already? No, I don't think so. He is accusing them, I think, mostly in tricking everybody before recognizing the threats. But I think that they are not really aware of all the complexity. The whole Biden administration, there are some smart people there who talk about that. Same as in Republican side who are talking about, there are some smart people who are saying, what isolationism? You cannot be unborn once you are. And we are already a global player. But unfortunately, isolationists are now prevailing. They have the majority of voters supporting them and a bunch of rednecks supporting them. And it's not used in a deprecating manner. Redneck can be a head of a big company. It's more a descriptor of a supporter. And this whole strategy of Democrats that started back with Obama, probably, and they're trying to push that further, and they refuse to put Russia in its place. And then when Crimea happened, and then there was Syria, when they didn't do anything after 2013, when they used chemical weapons, supposedly, and then there was Afghanistan, Iraq, the year of 22, that's happening now, and nothing. No Bradleys, no Abrams, no jets. They don't have everything for our victory, but even what they have, they're refusing to transfer. Just following the principle, make sure nothing affects that, nothing changes. And they're also afraid of repeating Afghanistan in Ukraine, and it actually is going that direction. And they're paralyzed with Afghanistan and Iraq failures. And analysts of the US president's administration erred 5 times in the last couple years. Afghanistan army estimate and stability failed. Ability of Russian army to take Ukraine, 3 days, right, failed. Real battle worthiness of Ukrainian army, real battle worthiness of new Russian army, and a real perspective of turning the conflict Russia versus Ukraine versus global South versus global West. Mistake, mistake, mistake. It's easier to ask where did not they err, and nobody can probably find such an answer. It's a chain of losses. Well, probably one thing. They said that Russia will attack, and Russia did attack. Okay. Yep, that's a great achievement, right? Behind that chain of mistakes, I would say there is institutional and cadre and personal incapability of their analysts. What Republicans are happily pointing at the Democrats and saying Ukraine is such a failure as Afghanistan was for you before. It's just Ukraine situation for us here doesn't make it any easier. Another news about United States and allies putting more effort so that by the end of next year, by the end of 24, Ukraine could conduct negotiations on a favorable basis with Russia, said National Security Aide to the President of the United States in Aspen Forum. And Jonathan Fiber said that he wants to put, we want to put Ukraine in a position, in a strong position for negotiations with Russia, so that Putin would have to choose whether to negotiate with them or to face a stronger opponent on the battlefront. So in light of the United States not supporting Ukraine militarily to a degree we need to, and not being able to unblock the funding because of the inner-party squabble, do you think it's a realistic agenda that he states? There are just two options here. One, they either prepared some scary surprise that is awesome for Ukraine, scary for Russia, and all of a sudden we get a bunch of aid, like a brigade worth equipment per month, right? Not even counting missiles and jets. Or these are just hot air statements. Same as, some media are running with the news that some British company found a way to produce millions of new 155mm artillery shells. People, have you analyzed Brits' military and their capabilities before making these statements? Ask how they're making NLAWs. What 150 artillery shells you can even talk about? Yeah, there was news that Europe is concerned about what? About their positions and military warehousing capabilities and stockpiled reserves. The meaning was that Britain has only 150 tanks that are usable. And right, the next question would be how many of them are actually ready to fight? They disarmed to a great degree. A great example of that, Britain and America are kind of hiding that, and I think they still have some, and America hasn't disarmed. But Germans is a classic example. Merkel comes to power 18 years ago or whatever. They had 26 battle-worthy brigades. Now we have 6 partially ready. What are we talking about? Yeah, here is that news. Or Poland. Sorry, Nikolay. Poland is arming so fast. They're buying 500 HIMARS, F-35s, Korean tanks, producing their crabs. Look at the terms of the 18th Division deployment. They initially had the beginning of 24, then 25, now they're pushing it to 26. You understand that the modern West cannot solve a question of taking 18,000 people and training them to turn into a battle-worthy division. And if they do everything by the book, if they don't do everything by the book, then their own trade unions will assassinate themselves and sue them to oblivion. And if they do by the book, it takes you forever. So the West is incapable of ramping things up drastically. And all these stories that America and Britain will wake up and will show, or the Europe as well, I think the collision with reality will be even more painful for those who believe that. Let me finish reading this publication. American newspaper Wall Street Journal posted that in Europe, the concern is growing because of empty arsenals and the poor position of their military. For example, Britain, the main ally of the United States in Europe, has only about 150 tanks and maybe a dozen long-range artillery systems. France has fewer than 90 systems of heavy artillery. That's what Russia is wasting monthly in Ukraine. Germany has enough shells to fight for 2 days. Danish don't have neither air defense nor submarines, and for decades, European countries were okay with defunding their military because the United States were taking leading roles of trying to support NATO by itself. But since the threats from Russian Federation are growing in Europe, the concern is also growing after 2 years of fighting in Ukraine. So after all these calculations, I understand the overall situation is even worse. Right, it is. And it's just the Western press for the first time is picking up that stone and looking under that, before they're making a conclusion that overall the armies of the West are totally incapable to fight a large-scale warfare and will lose it within a week. And I think Putin now is mostly upset that he picked the wrong target. If he went after Baltic countries, they would have really won in 3 days, most likely. Here's the main question is that everything is even worse. They invented a weapon that is much more convenient than fighting directly with Poland, with America, with Europe. They invented a tool called Orban. In Moscow, nobody wants Warsaw Pact. They do not want to occupy Europe. Not that. They can create relations just like they did with Orban, special economic relations with countries, getting political and economic levers to make sure the country obeys and follows suit. And they can use the same thing throughout Europe. They can use the same in Slovakia, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, where the rights are already winning. They do not want to occupy. It is too much of an effort. It's much easier to basically sell them the rope that the capitalists will hang themselves on. Old story. And this works rather well in many countries of Europe. Netherlands restored their purchases of Russian liquefied gas just 3 days ago. Why? But they're buying now. So on sanctions, indeed, the West is really in the gutter. There was a meeting of Orban and Macron in Paris. Prime Minister of Hungary declared that EU cannot accept Ukraine because it is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and it will not be fitting EU to accept such a country in its ranks. And apparently Macron and Orban did not reach any positive conclusion after this meeting. And Guardian also published a strange news, rather well-known publication, but still, that Orban's mission will meet Republicans in the United States in order to discuss ways to stop supporting Ukraine. That publication was removed. It caused a whole scandal and a lot of pushback. Guardian had to remove the whole publication and wipe out some parts initially. There was a whole scandal around it. Guardian did not explain why were they deleting these news and these parts of publication. How do you think that all came about, in your view? Well, somewhere lobbyists probably jumped and complained about the others. It's a usual schema when some lobbyists are arranging the meeting on the West, and the other lobbyist group that failed to make money on this deal, they start to feed certain data to journalists. Basically, like in Ukraine, right? They would send recruitment officers to your competitor's business, right? So kind of similar. So that's, I think, what's going on there. Somebody spilled this information, some lobbyists ratted on the others, and boom, this information leaked out to public. And the focus here would be probably not on that, but on the fact that American isolationists, they are full charismatic brothers of the European rights in their understanding, in the religious side of their aspect, and their task, indeed, a big chunk of them do want to dump Ukraine off their bandwagon, and the rights in Europe are also fighting with American influence, right? So their dream is that America would become more isolationist and would not meddle in European things. And American rights are also preferring to focus on themselves. So it's their joint vision that Ukraine shouldn't be supported too much. So that's what they're solving. They're trying to get rid of Ukraine in this case. And which lobbyists told the story, which ones, the ones that the article is written about, that's less important. The main thing is that that's what's happening. Also on this week, Donald Tusk in Poland came to power. His government is in power. Do you think that may change some anti-Ukrainian trend? What do we expect from them? Well, look, they are saying that we will unblock the truckers' protest on the border. But when they tried to do that, one of the truckers said that his vehicle is broken and he cannot remove it. And Prime Minister of Poland cannot really remove it. And it's not even the West, it's the Eastern Europe, it's Slavic countries where things were rather rough and straightforward before, right? They sent police, and now Prime Minister is trying to organize how to push this truck. And police came and started talking about that if you do not move your truck, we will have to evacuate that, and there'll be some trade unions and more protests. So you think these people going to win the war against the global South when they cannot move one truck when they need to? They're rather impotent, and the whole West now is impotent. They, of course, will deblocate the border and they'll figure it out, but how they're doing it and how long it'll take them to do that, that just outlines how not ready the Western group is to face the Southern group's challenges. And of course, Tusk's cabinet will be more complementary to Ukraine. It'll be easier for us to agree about things, but I don't see much new perspectives. Okay, we talked about sanctions. We briefly touched upon them, but let's go deeper. New York Times is saying that all Russian oil is selling higher than the ceiling of $60 per barrel. And also the West brings a lot of numbers saying that all the efforts against Russian oil have failed. And the main message here is that Russia still sells its oil at a higher price than the ceiling was established at. And Russia is getting more profits than they should have. And quintessential material in that publication is that Norfolk Naval Base on the 7th of December received a tanker from Novorossiysk, most likely delivered 50,000 tons of oil products from Russia, and the tanker is owned by a German company registered in Hamburg. Right? These people are fighting with sanctions day and night. Some people are now publishing that it's probably just fertilizers, but I have a question. How do you ship from one naval base to another naval base fertilizers? Right? The United States are one of the first violators of these sanctions. There is also another motion about limiting diamond sales, and some of the Emirates are fighting against Russia on that market, so they like that. But if you look at the oil market and their profits, you can also look at the Russian profits of this year from the oil sales, and at the beginning of November, they were only 17% lower than last year, year over year. And they've lost only 17% by losing European market, right? In theory, if the country lost that huge of a market, they would have lost a higher percentage. But in reality, they lost only 17. So that means that their gray measures to avoid sanctions and to reroute their shipping and rebuild their economy in a different fashion, they were rather successful. And like Lenin said, again, that same phrase, that capitalists will sell us the rope that will hang them on. The equipment with programmable devices on it are going to Russia, not directly, but all of a sudden, Armenia increased their purchasing of specialized machinery 25 times this year, and Kyrgyzia also increased that by several dozen times. So what's happening in Armenia and Kyrgyzia and Kyrgyzstan? What are they building so fantastic that they need to amp up their imports so much? Right, and even if that tanker moved some fertilizers from Russian base to Norfolk, that's right, that's still sanctioned. Sorry, yeah, there is some lagging in the internet, so we're talking over each other. Yeah, finish. I was just saying that they are selling oil above the ceiling, gas, oil. Even if you're selling Christmas tree toys, you're still violating sanctions of not dealing with Russia. And from one naval base to another naval base, that's a blatant violation. And when more information will come out after about the Biden administration's shenanigans and their dealings with Russia, yeah, you'll be rather surprised. And speaking of Germany, Germany is the country where the vessel was registered, right? Oh yeah, this is another country that's finding a ton of ways to avoid sanctions. It's such a damn parade of dual truths and dual values. This is not only impotent, this is also very full of lies. Just like here, right? So instead of building artillery shells and mortars, we are taking books out of libraries, forbidding Russian TV series. That's our answer to all the complex of decisions made in Russia, right? Our pivotal thing is canceling their TV series, not making our own, right, at least. And the same thing in America. Instead of turning Global West to be ready to resist that whole challenge that is now they're facing, they're really fighting with Russian sanctions and bringing oil directly to their naval base, right? This is fantastic. This is such a rot. Just a damned rot. Hey, I want to dive in a little deeper into Germany. I have some information prepared. So, Minister of Defense of Germany, Boris Pistorius, made a statement that his country is doing everything they can to aid Ukraine in their fight against Russian aggression. But he did outline that Kiev is not an ally of Berlin. And that's what Newsweek published. According to his statement, German industry is not capable to provide enough support as required by Ukraine, as requested by Ukraine, but they are ramping up their production. However, publication also highlights that to produce more ammo for their Leopard tanks, they took 6 months from the moment when the order was placed. So I have a question here. Does Ukraine have a real ally in the world, or is it just a parade of cancellations? Of course not, Nikolay. They don't know how to get rid of us now. They're telling you straight in the face, you're not allies. And we're screaming that they're allies, but they're not even partners, right? Allies are the ones who are fighting with you against the enemy. But the main thing is not that they're trying to push us off the bandwagon. That's understandable. When the article mentions that it took them 6 months to produce artillery shells for their main tank, this is a sentencing. This is the end of what they're now. It's just like in America, they're saying, oh yeah, 90% of what we're giving to Ukraine is remaining in America because we are funding our industries and we're getting rid of old weapons. These are signals, right? So 90% is not staying at Ukraine and they're giving old equipment here. And if you look at the videos, who's working at the manufacturing facilities to produce those shells and new military production amping effort, it's old guys. It's like in their old 60s, early 70s. The ones who've been working that back in the day, they couldn't even recruit new, younger generation to work there. And that's their effort. So that you understand, all these marketing of production of weapons is similar to Kyivstar and Vodafone explaining that their recent failure of providing service was a minor thing, and in reality they are really concerned about well-being of Ukrainians. But there is one summary line: there was no service. Finland came over and they mentioned they're dedicating 24 million to amp up production of artillery shells for Ukraine. And to give you a right scale, if you come to me and say my apartment burned down, I would tell you, okay, sure, this is $24 for you. So that's the scale of the effort. But all these messages is marketing. All the system in the West is based upon increasing the profitability to grow the stocks and to grow the shares cost. If you can go to the website of Raytheon, one of the leading manufacturers of munitions, there are major news blogs there on the landing page. The third one is usually about increasing the standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in essence, they're more concerned about having national and sexual minorities represented at the company and everybody would cheer them. This is their agenda. And the nod towards Ukraine is just a standard nod as they nod to LGBTQ, Indians, disabled, and whoever else, right? So all those people who need to be in the tolerated group. It has nothing to do with real increase of Ukraine fighting capacities. It's just a marketing statement so that the shares would not go down, or even better, would go up. And they care about their own shares and the struggle to find the right balance line between the effort of work, production, and the trade unions. That's the red line that's going through all that. Well, right, but there is a real agenda in Germany that was surprising to many people this week. It is also related to Hamburg, that same city that where tanker was registered at, that was transporting some unknown goods from one Russian naval base to American. The District Court of Hamburg sentenced only one member of the group rape of a schoolgirl to a real time in jail, time in prison. In the early 20s, there was a case when several groups of men raped a girl in one of the parks in the city of Hamburg. And it happened 3 years ago. There were three groups of young adults from 17 to early 20s, each of which took turns in raping the girl. Everybody's guilt was proven in court. Only one person is getting 4 years in prison. Everybody else, 4 people got probation, and 4 more also got just a slap on the wrist, no real punishment. Nobody even made a public statement that they regret their actions, and each of them has to work 60 hours of public works to pay compensation to the victim. What do you think it tells us about? Oh, they're afraid to provoke disorders by migrants. That's, I think, what's about. Remember, there was a loud story in Zakarpattia in Ukraine where several classmates raped their classmate girl, and the whole village was trying to cover up for that, trying to play the card that these guys are okay, and nothing happened until it was properly prosecuted. So, yeah, that's somewhat similar. They're really more afraid about rebellions on their hands if the migrants will start revolting against their court decisions. They're talking about all that inclusivity, but they have regions in their countries where police is not even going to. You know, the main thing of the West, let me stamp it with a very fat stamp over, their moral impotence is another part. When the West said that there is an axis of evil, and immediately after that they did not declare their readiness to fight and die fighting against this axis of evil, they became moral bankrupts. And because when you declare that there is an axis of evil, right, like Reagan did back in the day, and you're saying that you're ready to put your body and soul fighting that evil, that's one story. But when you declare that there is an axis of evil, but you're not going to fight against that, you're more interested in the cost of your shares and your internal well-being and trying to pacify the layers of society where your police is not even going to, so they don't revolt. That means that you're declaring that you will be living with evil. That's full moral bankruptcy. They basically signed off on that. And that moral bankruptcy, I think, is much worse than any inability to manufacture artillery shells or even using half a year to produce artillery shells for your main tank. This just, is a material aspect of it. And right, I want to mention that these rapists were the citizens of Syria, Chernogorия, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. All right, so United States of America, let's close some information on that about strategic defense that we've been talking about. They had a huge publication about strategic defense, and it is considered that this is one of the bringing to reality that in the future Ukraine needs to concentrate on its defense in this coming year. And this is what the title of the article says. United States advises Ukraine to dig in on their current positions and grow their resources. And New York Times. Nikolay, New York Times is even okay. I saw another article by Washington Post when they were talking about Zelensky not listening to the Western experts, right, last week. So it sounded basically, if we simplify that, we bought school uniforms, football uniforms for a defective kids team, and they failed to win in the match. So they're guilty, we'll not give them the uniform. That's basically what the article was about. And that's about our soldiers who are paying with their blood and lives for everything. About our people who are paying with the lives of their civilians, children, women, and the brave soldiers daily. You cannot imagine the lower position than this on the West. And they take them 3 months to realize what we're talking about. So in 3 months from now, they'll probably be talking what we're discussing today. And I'll give you one more heavy fact, right? Who is a subject? A subject is the one who is ready to take responsibility for made decision. So when they're saying, "Oh, you're defective kids, we gave you uniforms and you did not become champions," then we're not responsible. You're responsible for that, so we'll not be supporting you. They're basically saying that they're not taking any responsibility for situation on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and they're pushing real responsibility on Ukraine. And as one Republican who was making a statement yesterday, and the others do, that you'll have to pay with territories for the decision they've made. They're refusing to take real responsibility for not providing requested amounts of aid, for all these policies trying to circumnavigate the sanctions. And when you do that, when you push the responsibility away, you stop being a subject. And now the headline, United States are stopping being a subject. That's the meaning of their valuations of our counteroffensive and everything happening here in Ukraine. And if they stopped being a subject, right? That's it. They're not subjects internally. They're not subjects outwardly. German government, incapable of manufacturing tank shells in lesser amount of time than 6 months, is not a subject. German system of power that gives such sentencing to rapists of their girls is not a subject. Polish government that cannot move one truck. It is a question of surviving of Poland in the future. And this is not my quote, this is the quote of the head of national security, who said that in 3 years they'll be facing direct conflict with Russia. And they cannot tow one truck from the highway. This is a full moral, material, and power bankruptcy. They're ceasing to be subjects. They're refusing to be subjects. Raytheon, main ammo manufacturer, is caring about diversity. They're not caring about production. And of course, on the picture you see those faces of local different Native Americans smiling, holding hands, and that's what's represented on their landing page, where everything is open and beautiful. That's what they're concerned. And we're not a subject for a long time already, because now we'll pay for 32 years of stupid pride, idiotic fanatism, dual standards, and stealing from ourselves, and everything else. It's time to pay the bills. You cannot be making idiotic decision for 32 years and then not pay for that. Look, there's one phrase in New York Times publication that I want to highlight. American bureaucrats are saying that many Ukrainian leaders do not realize how unstable is the future funding of this war from the United States. That these Ukrainian generals and high-ranking leadership, political leadership of Ukraine have very inadequate understanding of how much Ukraine can support, how much United States can support Ukraine. They're asking for millions of artillery shells that do not exist. And American bureaucrats are saying that Ukraine will have to fight with limited budget. In the United States, they are making a statement that without changing strategy, 2024 may be very similar to 1916, the most deadly year of the First World War, when hundreds of thousands of people died and the lines of war have not changed. So this comparison with the first year of the First World War, does it mean that the United States is sending a direct signal? Gentlemen, next year will be the first year of big global collision, and we will not be helping you much in it. No, Nikolay, I think they're saying a little different message here. First, we cannot help you. Read between the lines, we don't want to. Second, you'll pay with the blood of infantry on the battlefield, your losses will amplify. And now connect that with the law about mobilization in Ukraine, when this mobilization commission is now going through the gyms and public places and gathering more people, and lack of strategic defense structures. Now they're publishing that something they're starting on the north, but in general, there's none. And the slow walking of our military-industrial complex, which is not there where we need it to be. So they're outlining, saying that, guys, you will suffer big losses. And remember voting to aid Ukraine in February, right? If it will even happen, and diminishing the subsidies for the refugees in Europe. And when Ukraine will have to start cutting social payments too, because we will be running out of money and will suffer serious losses on the front, imagine what will be happening in March in our internal policies. And of course, add the Russian major offensive after Russian so-called election in spring of next year. I think by the end of spring next year, in 24, maybe even sooner, we will be suffering some serious issues. And given that the president now is talking about capturing several Russian POWs and declaring that they liberated suburb of one little village and not making right decisions, neither him nor Congress. And the result of that would come to face us in about a year and a half. So we'll be in a real funnel of catastrophes by that time because of our idiocy, treason, thievery, and because of the same things coming in the West and happening in the West. And that's it. Is there an exit? Yes, there is a way out. I don't know if the West will awaken, but we need to awaken. I'm, though, doubtful that we will, given that we mentioned these reasons at the beginning of the stream. So tell me, what do we need to do in order to take a proper strategic defense in 2024, even in the context of engineering fortifications? Do we need to mobilize the construction industry or do something that... This is a rather simple task. First, we need to understand the real perspectives for us of getting new shells, new ammo, and see what territory can we hold with that level of support. Leave the current front line to these positions that we can outline, especially withdraw from the areas where it's difficult to hold with the current level of support, especially when it's not favorable position or stuff. Then switch to extraordinary management style in the government when there are no decrees, no laws. No, you don't do that. You do direct orders from this government, from this body. And you don't go to jail for violating. There's no prosecution. If you violate once, you get a warning. If you violate twice, you get executed at a spot. Then maybe we can buy some time in order for us to rework the agreements again with the West. Again, I'm not too hopeful that they will awaken and they will start helping us more, but at least we'll be able then to hold some territory. And we have two allies, natural borders that we have, the city line of Donetsk regions, which is difficult to take. And second is that Russians are impotent on the battlefield too. It takes them a long time to take even a regional town center. And that's on a strategic level. Yeah, we're kind of complimenting them on their decision, but on the tactical, in the field, they are wasting thousands for taking one village. They cannot fight this war for too long like that, so it will allow us to have some time in order to maybe provide 10 and then grow to 20, grow up to 30% of our own demand, and then maybe start cooperating with other players. And the most interesting part, that it may be not our immediate neighbors, but some very remote countries from which we would not be expecting aid, right, in this changing world, such as South Korea, for example. So we need to concentrate on ways to win time. And there are only two ways to do that. Then you get some space to make decisions. Perhaps more things will happen in Russian politics and other things that can affect it. But we do need that way out. There is another way out, but I'm not going to name it now. It's not the time. This is the most reasonable that we can do at the moment. I suspect in 3 months from now, they will start understanding what we're talking about, because the general lag, as we see, is about 3 months from what we're discussing here. So that's the framework when they'll be starting to make this, take these measures. But first, they'll be non-systemic, not enough, and very episodic. And you can only save it with a real systemic approach. That means that we'll be losing territories. And positive things for us is that Russians are very inadequate in the way they conduct offensive operations, and they're learning, but yeah, they're still very ineffective. And second is that we're too big of a country to fall in 1 hour. It's difficult to occupy us so fast. then we can bide some time and see if we can recover. But the pace of our decision making, I really don't see us in any advantageous situation. And the main thing, Nikolai, is that I don't see an answer. What for? And now the culmination of this message. Today, media published an instruction in Ukraine to fifth element, to Poroshenko's ex-president property nightclub. And they published the instruction what to do for the personnel if the recruitment mobilization service comes in looking for adult males. And this is what they're supposed to say. You need to declare that this club is owned by the congressman. You have to tell the police that you are cutting support for Ukraine military, because this congressman is very largely supporting Ukraine military. And then the technical personnel on the males should hide in a certain technical part of the club and not be visible, to not be caught by the recruitment service. So, yeah. And by the way, I'm still against that Poroshenko would not be. Oh yeah, the last step would be not to do anything with the recruitment service, not to agree to anything, and call Poroshenko and his aides to try to resolve this situation. So we behave as idiotic fanatics. Poroshenko is the one pushing for that Ukrainian, we will take everything back. He is supporting military right, but Ukrainian right, but this instruction internally, this is a sentencing to all politics of Poroshenko and to all that group starting with Yushchenko, who were pushing a Canadian version of patriotism here, and at the end, we're looking at their instruction, how their personnel should be working, right? And even if it is a fake and somehow published, as attack on Poroshenko, these exact instructions are in other clubs, because that's exactly how they behave. You know why they are? Because nobody knows an answer. What for? And the main trouble of our power is not even not being capable of produce artillery shells, but not being able to answer the question, what are we fighting for? Because this is not defined on the TV and in print. You do not gauge your efficacy in the media. You gauge your efficacy by seeing how many people are willing to stand for you. When you have 4 million conscription-age males trying to duck and cover from any of such effort, this is the sentencing. This is the outline that your messaging fails. You do not have an answer to why. When the president comes out and says, we captured suburb of a village and took several Russian soldiers prisoners, this is such an incongruency with the real topic and real actions. I don't have other words for that. This is a sentencing for our system. And even extraordinary measures that I'm talking about will not give the right effect without giving an answer. Why do you need independent Ukraine? All these men, millions of men who are hiding, do not see that as a value, who are hiding in some technical room or not going to the gym to avoid being drafted. Do you know what is being written now on the collective subconsciousness of Ukrainian families? The husband that is ducking and hiding at home, wife who's going shopping for him, do you think she'll have much respect for him at the end of this story? And this is in many of Ukrainian families. And kids who are seeing their dad hiding and mom doing most of the work and going outside. What do they record on their subconscious? How do you think they'll be voting when they grow up, if by some miracle we still maintain independent Ukraine? What will they remember? Dad hiding under the sofa and mom carrying all the heavy loads and heavy purchases and hiding dad under her skirt so he wouldn't go to the army? Who is guilty? We, all together, for 32 years who've been lying, making dumb decisions, who are perpetuating some fantastic allies, as we thought. And now we'll be using a very large spoon to eat all the fruit of all that. And we can probably record another stream about deeper roots of that position, about Cyril and Methodius' brotherhood, but that's a different stream. So all these millions of men dodging the draft, that's the direct loss of dignity by our society at large, by our country. And all that crap happened because after the disintegration of Soviet Union, we lost the meaning. And it's such a huge vacuum on the field of ideas that we started to replace, to try to create surrogates with some lies and some surrogates, some fake ideas. And now, people reporting on each other if somebody listened to Tchaikovsky, supposedly Russian composer, right? So when people will realize that forbidding to listen to Tchaikovsky and writing on your neighbors for using different language, not Ukrainian, at the cash counter, not until our society realizes that all these things are so wrong that we should be amping up our production and not hiding our men, dodging the draft, not attacking and writing on each other neighbors. This is a indirect correlation. But we made a new TV series about shores, right? I would say, if I'm so serious, these political leaders who are behaving like that, they have no right to live as political leaders. And the history will prove, I think, with their idiotic strategic steps. And Ukraine is triple dumb strategically. And I'm quoting Guzar here, Lyubomir Guzarov, if he's an authority, that our problem is in immorality. Everything else just stems from it. Is he still an authority, Nikolay? It's a difficult question, Alexei. Who considers him an authority? Because, in our country, very few people even have an authority. Oh, right, yeah. Each of us is a president who is hiding under the bed from the draft. We are leaders in that management style. About Canadian patriotism and that style, we probably should bring a publication from Global Mail, Canadian article. The title of this article is Ukrainian Government Transferring the Blame onto Foreign Media, and they analyze Klitschko and his statement in support of Zaluzhny. They basically go into, back in the day, remember when Poroshenko was trying to cross the border to meet Orban? SBU launched a statement saying that there are provocations being worked and they're not letting him go out. So this was the reason for this publication. But inside this publication, they said that Ottawa has not supplied not a single one out of 50 light armored vehicles and armored vehicles for medical evacuation, which Justin Trudeau promised as the new package of help, the size of $650 million, which he announced to Zelensky back in September. The Globe is not quoting the source in Ukrainian special services that provided the information, but the main point is that Trudeau promised to deliver new items that will be manufactured in London or Ontario, but instead, the article says they could have sent their own, currently in service in Canada, and then get themselves new ones from the factory. So despite Ukrainian diaspora, despite a number of politicians loyally expressing their support of Ukraine, do you think it kind of looks like a overall agreement between the United States, Canada, and the other countries when they do not provide the resources they generally could? Well, Nikolay, rotten scoundrels, what can I say? That's it. We gave all the gauges and all the estimates to this behavior. And now they're running around also with moralizing statements saying that Ukraine needs to be more moral. In the meantime, they will not be able to transfer 50 trucks, 50 armored vehicles, right? And all that rot will lose an attention, not because Russia or China is smarter or stronger, but because this whole alliance is rotten. It is not their victory, not the Russian victory. It's our defeat that's looming. All right. There is a good piece of news, though, and I would say it's not good, it's probably positive. There is an initiative. Congressman from the fraction People's Servant, Grigory Mazurashu, addressed President, starting the initiative for regular praying time to the Lord to help Ukraine and to win in this war, right? It's a good news, right? I think it's religion too. Well, yeah, I know. You know my relation to religion. I'm a Christian. So one thing though, you do not use law to promote religional aspects, because this is wrong. The law would not work and will not be good for religion too. Can I add one more thing today? We're finishing. Yeah, we are at the finish. Okay, so people were happy today about that new picture of Zaluzhny, Umerov, and Syrsky, three of them together, and that trilateral unity, that we only have one commander-in-chief and they're friendly. Today, by the way, is the day of ground forces, and as an officer of ground forces who served, among other places, there as well, we have about 73% of our troops in ground forces. So I do congratulate all of them with their professional day. So many people are running around now, happy with optimism, showing that picture that everything is fine there. So I have a question to Umerov and to our leadership. Did that photo cancel the fact that Syrsky or Napoleon or Makedonsky or whoever you want to put in this position cannot occupy effectively two positions, being the chief of command of the Eastern Front and chief of command of ground troops, ground forces? Is anybody concerned with that? Perhaps instead of taking that picture, it would make sense to address that time for rebuilding, restructuring the system of command in the troops. What Zaluzhny suggested a while ago, to add additional level of command that will help higher level commanders to organize the effects, to organize the operations. That is, he is being denied that, so causing extra pressure on the higher level of command and lower level of command. So instead, we're getting pictures. Instead of getting something effective done, we're being fed these pretty pictures and messages about taking suburbs of a village and 200 millions of American aid that will be enough to conduct our warfare for maybe half a day. So instead of actually supporting Zaluzhny in his statement, in his initiative to create a more effective command structure in the troops, they're feeding us these pictures. They're considering us to be not even children, but mentally incapacitated. And you know why? Because we as a nation allow our leaders to treat us this way. And this whole story for us is about losing our dignity. That we went bowing down to that white man of the West who is not even who is not an authority anymore, and who, by the way, is not white anymore. And there's a bunch of immigrants changing that landscape, and in Germany they're not even prosecuting them for raping their own girls. So I would say that the main effort is to bring the main focus should be on bringing back the dignity. The West often is being feared by the other countries of the world, and the main target audience who is afraid of the West, people without dignity. And in our case, we just trying to get deeper onto the needle of the West. But those people like Russia who are trying to pull themselves off that needle of dependency on the West in a horrible, horrible way, but they're still disconnecting from it while we are getting deeper onto it. And I think it'll be getting worse until we realize the actual issues and start addressing them, instead of putting these pictures and fake news on top of it to cover the actual issues. And we'll be otherwise paying a very hefty price for 30 years of immorality, for all the lack of real management, real addressing, real economy, real addressing the issues the country faces. We, I'm afraid, will pay such a huge price for all that everybody will have their share. And those who were participating, those who were bribing, those who were getting money, and those who were staying silent watching that. So about this picture, I also want to add, Alexei, it actually replaces an important picture. Back in the day, you called for President Zelensky to take a picture with Zaluzhny to come out together. And now we see this picture instead. Thank you, Dima, for showing it. Where it's not a consensus that is being shown, not a national consensus, but just a civil minister of defense hugging two generals, basically showing that between them there is some unity. But their unity should be expressed in a different fashion, right? Exactly. We don't need unity between them. You can quarrel professionally, you can discuss things, show that you functionally are capable, address the glaring issues, restructuring the command of Ukraine. And we actually have hundreds of commanders of different level watching our streams. A commander of a company. Has anyone calculated, just done the work metrics, all the tasks that he's supposed to do? the commander of a platoon, the commander of a battalion, the commander of a brigade, they're lost a long time ago with the amount of duties they have to. They just don't have enough hours in a day to perform everything that is being thrown on them. And that's what Zaluzhny tried to resolve. Instead, they cancel this and they keep throwing more responsibilities on the existing structure. Where does it lead us? It leads us faster to defeat. So instead of pictures, we need to unload extra tasks from the company leader, from battalion leader, from the platoon leader to make sure they are performing their real core functions. Koля, there is a crap ton of things not effective in the army, and instead we're putting pictures and news that we filmed another TV series. Well, the payback will be dire in the very near historic future. And by the way, I want to say, Alexei, in regards to feedback from the servicemen, because they are watching us plenty from the front, and they keep asking us to help them. The last story of aid, when they addressed us directly and said, hey, unfortunately, I cannot open the fundraiser myself for my troop. Why? Because on my level of command, I'm being told that our military prosecution service is actually conducting investigations if the military officer is opening the account for a fundraiser for his troop, if the account is in his name. So right now, military system is actually trying to prosecute officers for doing the fundraisers for their troops. Right? What does it mean? Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It means that soon we'll see another picture of the head of military police somewhere with one of the military heads to demonstrate the unity, right? I don't care about your unity in this case. Quarrel and make sure you create functional structures. Make sure the soldier can get support instead of stifling it and suffocating them, cutting off the resources. Alexei, thank you for this stream. It turned out to be a fiery one today. And I think this was a big step forward in the process of bringing our country back to reality. I remind about the big fundraiser under the stream, a fundraiser for UAVs, for NGU. Right, because whatever we say here, whatever is happening on the front, the main goal of our support today is the soldier on the battlefront, because only he is standing between a situation where we are here and where we are not. We're not alive. Only Ukrainian soldier. So please help if you can to get the fundraiser done for the equipment that allows us to hold the defense and to gives us time to search for ways out of this difficult situation. That's why the whole effort of our society needs to be concentrated on providing aid to the soldiers, to the fighting units. And while political leadership is scratching their heads and thinking something, let's us as a civil society step in and try to support our troops. Yes, the link will be in the description. Once again, we do not touch any of these funds ourselves. These monies go directly to the troops. And again, we tell our troops that please communicate with us. If there is another fundraiser you need to run, we will be glad to help you. We're trying to amplify your signal to make sure you find resources that you need and it's doable and you can carry out your tasks. Thank you. This was a War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Thank you, Alexei. Subscribe to Alpha Media, subscribe to Alexei channel as well, and of course to the Privateer station if you are listening or watching that in English. Have a good night. Good luck and help your soldier.